to turn this over to Elizabeth Garner, our State Demographer. Thank you for driving up to Denver for this. And let her give you a presentation on current trends in demographics. I really appreciate her coming up here and helping us out.
Absolutely, I appreciate being invited. You guys may be questioning, oh my God, really? Am I going to have to sit through data and information in the afternoon, especially a Thursday, hot Thursday afternoon? But yeah, they invited me, so you get me. I'm going to go through some of these slides really quickly. Some of the other ones I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. The point behind this whole piece is that there are outside forces that will impact Larimer County. And you need to understand what those are and how they fit into the picture, because it's awesome that you guys are going through this planning process. This is probably one of the most important things that a county does, is go through this, and understanding what some of these outside forces are is going to be important in how you move forward. One of the biggest things I want you to think about and step away from this process with is the fact that jobs, population, and age all go together. And so when we're looking at how Larimer County is forecast to change, it's really important to understand how those pieces fit. Another piece to really understand is that we've been experiencing a lot of disparate growth across the state. A lot of growth along the I-25 corridor and nowhere else. Question is, where does Larimer fit into that picture? Is there other things that Larimer can be doing to see if growth can be possible in other parts of the state and not just along the 25 corridor? Or is there just some forces that are pushing it that direction? Migration, well, it seems like a lot of people maybe came in from other places. How many are actually native Laramites? I don't know what they're called. Larimonians? There's a couple, handful. All right, how about native at least Colorado? Couple more. See, so very few. So a lot of you are migrants. And the question is, how do we continue to attract and retain the best and the brightest? Some of you might be thinking to yourself, do we really need more? I'm going to probably try and convince you that being able to at least attract people is really important in the system. But the point is, can we do it? And if we do it, where do we put them? Is an important piece. Aging, we do it every day. But this will really impact Larimer County, and especially this concept of the labor force. So understanding how that fits into your picture is going to be important as well. Increased race and ethnic diversity, and actually how this also fits into the labor force is going to be important to understand. We're seeing some slowing income growth. I may not spend very much time on that. You can ask questions if you want. But I'm going to really talk about the fact that Colorado is slowing in its growth, but it's still growing by a lot. And you're like, God, Elizabeth, really on a Thursday you're going to say both sides? Yes, I am, because I want you to understand why. All right, so big piece is that Larimer County is part of the state, which is part of the U.S. It's important to know where the U.S. is. So the U.S. is at about 325 million people. We increase by about 2.3 million people a day, God, that'd be awful, a year, or at 0.7% annual average growth rate. Slowest annual average growth rate in the United States since the Great Depression in the 1930s. Would you believe that? Yeah. See, she believes it. At least one. But it's true. So the U.S. is slowing down as a whole. Oh, no?
She turned the lights
Oh,
on.
okay. I was like, did I say something wrong? He's giving me this big no fact. Colorado's at 5.6 million, ninth fastest growing state at 1.4%, so quick math, twice as fast as the U.S. as a whole, but last year, 7th, the year before that, 2nd. So we are slowing down, and relative to other states. So that's important to know. 8th in total growth, increasing by 77,000. Last year it was 90,000, the year before that it was 99,000. So also in absolute terms slowing down. And then relative to other states, just a quick question out there, Texas. Texas, who knows how fast or how many people Texas grows by annually? Any Texans, former Texans? willing to admit former Texan? No one? Throw out a guess. Throw out a guess. How many people does Texas increase by annually? Just a former Texan. 450,000 people a year is what Texas grows by. So let's just be thankful that we're not Texas. That would be a bummer. Range in Colorado, though, is some counties are increasing, some counties are declining. And if we look at a map of the state, all of the red, orange, yellow counties are counties that have been increasing in population since 2010. All of the shades of blue are counties that are declining. So we can see quickly that some of Colorado is experiencing the growth, some of Colorado is not. Most of the growth along the I-25 corridor, and in fact, since 2010, 95% of the total growth for the state has been along the I-25 corridor. First time since we've been collecting the data that we can say that that is where the growth has been. Historically, it's somewhere between 80 and 85%. So there is a departure from norm that we've seen recently, and sometimes the question is why? Is it the jobs that we're creating? What is it that's creating this concentration along the I-25 corridor? When we look at total population change, there's two pieces that we grow by. And this is really important because a lot of people want to look at potentially limiting growth or at least understanding it. The blue component is called natural increase. That's births minus deaths. So you take all of your births, you subtract your deaths, and you get this blue piece. So note to self, these are babies. They are not drivers, and they are not buying houses, okay? But they typically live in a house, and they ride in a car, but they are not the ones doing it. And you'll get it all the time, especially from the newspapers. They'll say, 100,000 more drivers on the road. And I'm like, nah, not really, because they're not the drivers yet. The red is natural increase, or is net migration, the ins minus the outs. This line right here is 100,000. During the 70s, we hit 1 year above 100,000. That was 5% annual average growth rate. Then we had the lovely 80s, where we lost population. We had 5 years of net out migration. We had the oil and gas bust and the savings and loan bust. That was a bummer. Then we had the recovery in the 90s. A lot of that was due to the fact that we had a comparative advantage. We had a really bad decade in the 80s. Therefore, our prices were better, land was better, it was easier to get in. So we had that growth. So we had 7 years where we had growth above 100,000. Since 2001, we have not reached that mark. Yet, what do you hear people talking about all the time? Oh, those people, we got too many people. And I'm like, guys, look, we haven't been like we used to be. We're slower than we used to be. So is it really the people, or is it how we allocate the people? Is it the transportation corridors? Is it where the jobs have grown? That's really the problem. It's not the people. And I'm sorry, I just have this thing, I'm a demographer and we just like people. So the fact that people are so anti-people is really sometimes hard for me. But it's important to know where that growth rate is, and it's important to see that we are slowing down both in migration as well as in natural increase. Now, if we look at the same chart for Larimer County, we can see the similar patterns, although it's been very much driven by net migration. And then we can see the natural increase on the opposite side. We can see this recent slowdown. We can see when we've had different booms and busts. That bust in the early 2000s really hit Larimer County very strongly because of the tech side. But you can see the boom that definitely was taking place in the 90s as well. And if we look, we can almost see this relationship between the natural increase and net migration, kind of a 3-to-1 component in terms of where we see it. 2014, if you can see 6,000 over 1,000, or 1,500 in terms of natural increase, and then that resulting population change. Just to give you an idea of how significant net migration is really to your population increase. We can then also look at what's happening to your natural so that was net migration. So what's happening to your natural increase? We're seeing this increase in deaths. The red is deaths, the blue is births. We can see this flattening in the births, really a flattening since 2007. And we're starting to see this increase in deaths. Not because there's some weird plague, okay? It's just that we've got a larger number of people in age groups that tend to die. So that's the only piece. This is very, very natural. This is very normal. No cause for concern. But it's important to see that you've got the closest point in time now between deaths and births. So that natural increase component is very small in terms of your total population change. If we then look at net migration across the state, all of the red, orange, yellow are counties that have had positive net in-migration. All of the shades of blue are counties that have had net out-migration. Even more disparate is what you see now, so many counties, 23, with out-migration during this time period since 2010, where we're one of the better economies and one of the fastest growing states. So we're really seeing this disparity within the state as a whole. When we migrate people to Colorado, what kind of folks do we get? We get youngins. Age is along the horizontal axis. Red line is at 65. Our bread and butter is like a 28-year-old. That's what we get. This is our age distribution of those net migrants. Lots of young adults, not that many at the older age groups. And it's important to know this because that's when we're thinking about employees, when we're thinking about our labor force. How do we attract and retain? And the point is, in a lot of parts, it's really that how do we attract a young adult? Do we have housing available for young adults that they can afford? And that's some of the questions to start asking ourselves. It's even more young, that sounds horrible English. I'm much better with numbers than I am with words. Age distribution for the net migrants in Larimer County, much younger. So right there, about 20-year-old is your bread and butter, but that's because of the university. That really is what draws in a lot of young adults. And that is really your prime time. Then you lose them because people do have to eventually graduate and leave. And then you get them at a little bit older age group, but again, very flat around that 65 plus, but it's been positive on the 65 plus. So it's again important to know what kind of people you attract. Biggest question, why do they come? And why do they stay? Jobs. It's so funny. People say to me, well, Elizabeth, why are all of these people coming? And I'm like, because we're creating jobs. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, no, jobs. Guess what? A job is a person. And guess what? A person lives in a housing unit. So really, when we're looking at this balance between jobs and people, jobs require housing units. And people so many times say, oh no, they're just coming for marijuana. I'm like, all right, no. We can get, some people come. I mean, granted, people have come, some people, but across the US, there's other states that have it, and you still have to live in a housing unit and have a job. Otherwise, it makes it really tough. So jobs are people. And we can see over time, job growth is a blue bar, red line is net migration. As we create more jobs, we get more people. We can look at the same thing for Larimer County. The gold is the job growth, the green line is net migration. So we can see this direct relationship between jobs and people. So a lot of times when we're looking at comp plans and we're looking at the future and people say, gosh, why are we getting so many people? I'm like, well, because we're creating jobs. And do you ever say, you know, should we slow job growth? Blasphemy, right? Who often says, let's slow jobs? But that is the direct influence on why we get people. And especially in Larimer County, where the significant part of your population growth is due to migration. Where are you in terms of jobs? Well, way beyond pre-recession peak levels of employment. One of the fastest growing or returning to peak employment counties in the state. You and Weld and Adams led the state in terms of recovery, even beat out Denver in terms of that recovery. Not that you compete with Denver, but I just wanted you to know. What kind of jobs do you guys have here? What I've done is I've broken this out by color, which shows the wage rate as well as the industry. The red color is the low wage jobs. So these are areas that play below average wage. The purple, the medium wage, is purple, and the high wage is green. If we look at the dominating 4 industries in Larimer County, being retail, trade, state government, accommodations, food service, and health services, they all pay medium to below average wages. My question, are you creating housing units for median and below average wages? This is a really important piece to be looking at in terms of understanding the jobs and the types of people that you get in a result. Is there anything else I wanted to say on this? I don't think so. We can come back to it if there is. I'm again putting here in terms of the size of the industry is focused by the size of the bar. And then the change since 2010 is in the second column. What we can see is that government has been one of the fastest growing industries, and I didn't segment it here by state, local, and federal, but I did put a little star because I'm going to explain it in a second. Accommodations and food service. Construction is finally coming back, and then some manufacturing, which is very solid. A lot of the government piece here is that your hospital transitioned from private to public. So when it went into the UC system, then it gets classified as state. So that was that movement. So don't panic. It's not just you hired a whole bunch of state employees. Okay, not that we're bad.
Colorado State University probably.
CSU is huge in there as well, but that big gain plus this decline in health services is a little bit of a figment of the data, just so everybody's aware. Any other questions? Okay. So, if people can't live where they work, what do? They commute. And they were part of my fun commute up here today. I had done so well. Like the last 3 or 4 travels up here, I'd done really good. Traffic wasn't too bad. Today was such a bummer. I know, somebody said it was because it was warm. I don't know. I'm not going to take that. So this is an idea to get a picture of your commuting patterns in Larimer. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's actually not as bad as some counties. So consider yourself lucky. I don't know if that's a way to say it. The large green circle are your total jobs in Larimer County. And so that's the 138,000. And this is, I'm going to tell you, this is wage and salary jobs, and this is 2015. So that's why that number's lower. The large light green circle are those that live in your area, so that they're your labor force. Where the dark green is outside, these are folks that commute in to Larimer County to work. For this light green on the outside here, these are folks that commute, they live here in Larimer County and commute out to work. Where they intersect is where everybody lives and works together. So to get an idea, you've got about 55,000 people leaving, about 45,000 people coming in. So about 100,000 coming in and out of the county potentially on a daily basis. And just to get another view of it, these are folks that live in Larimer that commute out, which explains how much fun I had. Well, actually, these are people that, well, yeah, they probably were returning with me. So this was my fun. Although there's got to be more fun like right here going on, because this is really where I stopped. This is where, I mean, it was at a standstill right there. These are on the other side. These are folks that work in Larimer, and are commuting in from outside. So again, a lot of folks really concentrated on the southern part and then kind of a little bit to the east side. So you've got a lot of commuting going on. We're aging and aging really fast, and I'm bringing this up for just a couple of reasons. Primarily your labor force, to explain why we're feeling some things. This is Larimer County's age distribution, and this is important to see, and you can see it on our website. You can see how few people over the age of 65 you have. The black line is at 65. You've got a lot of boomers, which are purple. You've got your Gen X that are green. You've got your millennials and your college students here, and then your post-millennials, or your next generation that are coming in. And it's important to see that because all of these folks, if all goes well, they're going to age into that 65 plus time frame. This is Colorado's age distribution as well, and you can kind of see the difference between the two in terms of especially the size of that millennial population and that slope. And it's not really a death curve. I don't want you to think of it as a death curve at all. It's just the fact that what kind of folks do we migrate to Colorado? Youngins. How long does it take a youngin to get older? About 30 years, 30 to 40 years. And so we got our first big set of migrants really in the 70s, and it's taken them 30 to 40 years to age forward. And these guys, the silent generation, nobody was moving into Colorado at that point, but it was really the boomers that moved in here in droves. So we're aging fast, and it's weird. We're the 6th youngest state and the 3rd fastest aging, just because of this dynamic of that we didn't have anybody older to begin with. We've got a slew of boomers, but not a disproportionate share, about 25% of our population. And if all goes well, we're going to increase our population 65 plus from about 720,000 to 1.2 million just between 2015 and 2030, just in a 30-year time frame, increasing that population fairly significantly. Transitioning really from a fairly young state to a fairly average state. We're not all of a sudden going to get really old. The only way we'll get really old really fast is if we stop migrating youngins. That will definitely age us much faster because then we won't have that young group coming in. Why do I even care about this, and why should you care about this? One, it creates a huge economic driver. One of the fastest growing industries in the state recently has been health services. I could have told you 10 years ago that that was the fastest growing industry. Because what do people do as they age? Things hurt. The knee, the hip. And so we use doctor services a little bit more. And so that really impacts our occupational mix. So we've got our doctors and our home health aides. What else do older people do? And this is so stereotypically wrong of me to say. They eat out. Blue light specials were created for a reason. So what are we doing? We're creating jobs at both ends. Are we creating housing at both ends? Something to be thinking about. Labor force, really important to be thinking about. Most of these folks that are going to be aging out are baby boomers, and we're going to need people to fill their jobs. I'm going to age out. I need somebody to fill my job. So even if Larimer County stopped creating new jobs, we would need people to fill the jobs of the people leaving the labor force. So that's an important piece to be looking at, as well as other concepts that are really important for design, which is really looking at universal design, sidewalks, and all of the other pieces that come, as well as health, disabilities, transportation, all of those pieces. Fastest growing age group for Larimer County is going to be that 65 plus population, almost doubling in this time period between 2015 and 2030. Slowest growing age group are the 45 to 64-year-olds, followed by the youngins, with the 25 to 44-year-olds growing a little bit faster than these guys, but not as fast as the 65 plus. We're also becoming more racially, ethnically diverse, and I'm not going to go into that so you guys can ask any questions. But the biggest piece from this to take away is that as we're becoming more diverse, the Hispanic population is going to be the fastest growing segment of our labor force at the young end. Question is, are we preparing our young Hispanics to fill jobs? If not, guess what? We migrate in more workers. So what we want to do in order to keep that jobs population balance is make sure that everybody in your community can be the best possible worker that they can be. And that might mean by providing more educational attainment opportunities, especially for the Hispanic population. So just to tie things up, Colorado is forecast to increase from that 5.5 million in 2015 to about 8.5 million by 2050. Didn't I tell you guys it was slowing? That's 3 million people. But it's at a slowing growth rate. Most of that growth is along the Front Range in this dark blue color. If we look at it by county, we can see that if the state's increasing by 3 million people, 2.5 million forecast across the Front Range. Lucky us. Somebody's back there checking, no, we're not lucky. 2.5, 1.5 in the Denver metro area. Even more lucky me. Up north, 600,000 between Larimer and Weld. Another 400 down south between El Paso and Pueblo, within the remaining 500,000 around the rest of the state. The light gray being counties we're forecasting to decline. So you probably can't see it down here, but what we're forecasting is an increase in the population from about the 340, I think 360 now that we're at, increasing to about 484,000 by 2040. So you can see that number, but primarily driven by job growth and retiring of the current population that's here. So with that, when you go forward in this process, just remember that everything's connected. The jobs, the population, the labor force, migration, housing, prices are all connected. And how Larimer does this is going to be helped and influenced by everything that you guys are doing here, which is going to be great because you can help them think about the best way to put this together. Because some places do it well and some places don't. So Larimer has done a great job, I think, historically, and it'll be important to see how it goes forward. With that, thank you guys very much. And if there's any questions, I'll be around for a little bit that you guys can ask some questions.
In fact, we've got time for maybe 2 or 3 questions for Elizabeth, and then she will be staying here to answer further questions. Who's got a question so far? Any? Okay, go ahead.
Hearing the facts about aging population, but aging population staying in the workforce, and that aging population staying in the workforce in your lower category job earning areas, what effects is that going to have? And have you looked at that in Larimer County? Is it a true effect, or is it a figment of someone's imagination that that's going on here too?
That people are aging out of the labor force or staying in?
We're aging and staying in the labor force much longer.
So we
the
have
80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s are still in the labor force.
So definitely, we have seen across all of the data sets that people as they age are staying in the labor force longer. Right now, the labor force participation rate for the population over the age of 65 is 25%. It used to be 18 like 3 years ago, and it was as low as 12% as of the year 2000. So we've seen it increasing over time, absolutely. But eventually people do age out. Now the group that tends to be in like professional, scientific, technical industries that you've been sitting in a desk most of your life, those are the folks that are primarily staying in the labor force longer because they've had it fairly easy, but not like easy, but easier than laying brick, putting up drywall, hanging sheet, all of those more physical jobs that are still a huge part of the labor force and of all the jobs. So we are hoping praying that a lot of people stay in the labor force a lot longer. That will help the state continue to grow jobs because we've got a shrinking labor force on the young end. So one of the things that we're recommending is that a lot of communities look at aging plans and aging strategies to help their aging labor force stay workers longer, because it'll be a benefit to everybody.
Great question. Other questions?
So do you consider Colorado State University students as part of the labor force?
They're part of the labor force,
About
but
the
they're a
presidents?
very small part of the labor force. So a lot of them work part-time jobs, so they're in there. Just they're at a very low rate as well.
Good. Roger?
Given the mismatch between the jobs pay and the cost of housing, and as you look across Colorado, are there any particular strategies that you see that you could share with us that would be of benefit? Because obviously this community has that same disconnect.
You know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know of any good story. I don't know of very many places that have done a great job of balancing that job housing mix. Aurora has a fairly diverse housing mix, but primarily they're leveraging a lot of old, small housing units that were originally developed and still using those as more of the affordable, but the new constructions have not been in the affordable side.